Uh, all right, good afternoon, namaste, and konnichiwa to everyone present in this meeting. So, we will be having the special panel discussion that is organized by the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies under the aegis of the Raksha Manthan Dialogue Series. So, with this, I would like to welcome Dr. Luckhurst as well as Dr. Parmar, and of course, Dr. Kayembe, who will be joining shortly. Dr. Kayembe, welcome to this panel discussion. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to today's panel discussion on how nations cooperate when the world is in conflict, the G20, diplomacy, and global governance under pressure. I extend a respectful welcome to the Secretary of AMJC College, Mr. Udan Kumar Chodia, Associate Secretary, Mr. Hemant Chodia, Principal Dr. B. Mahavir, Vice Principal Dr. Anant Narayan, Dean Dr. M. Ramya, Deputy Dean Dr. R. Sureka, the HOD of the department, Mr. Gaurav Pandey, who is also with us. He has played a critical role in bringing all of us together. Our distinguished panelists, respected faculty members, scholars, experts, and our dear students who have joined us today. At a time when the world is witnessing wars, geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, uh, there are growing challenges to international cooperation. Discussions such as these become not only relevant but necessary. The themes of diplomacy, global governance, and multilateral cooperation affect not just policymakers and diplomats, but every society connected through today's deeply interdependent world as well. So today's discussion brings together diverse perspectives from international relations, diplomacy, literature, which Dr. Parmar will be talking about, culture, and global politics, offering us an opportunity to reflect critically on how nations continue to negotiate cooperation even amidst conflict and division. I thank all our guest speakers and attendees for being a part of this important conversation, and I hope today's session will inspire thoughtful dialogue, deeper understanding, and meaningful engagement amongst all of us. So before we kickstart the panel discussion, I would like to give a brief introduction about the panelists stands before the moderator here. So I will begin with a brief introduction about Professor Luckhurst. So Dr. Jonathan Luckhurst is Associate Professor of International Relations at the Graduate School of International Peace Studies of Soka University in Tokyo. Before moving to Tokyo in 2018, he worked in Mexico for several years, most recently at the University of Guadalajara as a member of the Mexican National System of Researchers. He has participated in the Group of 20s G20, Think 20 Engagement Forum, working its Gender Economic Equity Task Force and its 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Task Force. During the Japanese G20 presidency, he attended the G20 Osaka summit and participated in events of its Civil 20, Think 20, and Women 20 forums. A British academic with a PhD from the University of Essex in the UK, much of his research focuses on the G20 and its global governance influence. Dr. Luckhurst enjoys engaging with wider audiences, writing opinion pieces, and giving TV, radio, and press interviews in several countries. He also advises stakeholders on related issues. His publications include the books The Shifting Global Economic Architecture, published by the Palgrave Macmillan in 2017, and G20 Since the Global Crisis, published in 2016, plus academic journal articles and chapters for edited volumes on similar topics. We are also joined by Dr. Mrityunjay Rao Parmar, who is an assistant Department of English and Modern European Languages at the University of Allahabad, Prayagraj. His areas of expertise include Indian literature, post-colonial studies, translation studies, historical fiction, and British fiction. His research engages deeply with major literary figures such as Sri Aurobindo and Rabindranath Tagore, among others, reflecting a sustained interest in the intersections of literature, history, philosophy, cultural discourse. He is also a poet and a certified translator with notable translations of children's literature published by the National Book Trust, New Delhi. Additionally, he serves as the vice president of the University of Allahabad Alumni Association. His diverse scholarly and creative pursuits position him as a dynamic voice in contemporary literary and translation studies. And last but not the least, we also have a very special guest with us, that is Dr. Ephraim Abel Kayembe, who is a Malawian former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and parliamentarian of the Republic of Malawi. He's a trained international relations and global governance specialist. He has got more than 15 years of experience in high level public policy engagements, international development affairs, and global governance. A veteran legislator and global governance specialist, Dr. Kayembe blends political acumen with technical expertise in adjunct lecturing, research, and consultancies on matters of geopolitics, political economy, and international affairs. He has been an adjunct lecturer at Malawi School of Government since 2018 and has published academic papers on development aid, smart power, and peace and security studies. Sir has been a member of parliament for the Doha West from 2009 to 2014 and 2019 to 2025, where in between he has served as a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Okay, thank you and namaste to the panelists for joining us. We are really privileged to have you. Hopefully, the kind of the conversations that we have will be enriching the audience, and as a moderator myself, will be learning a great deal of knowledge from you all. So, thank you for joining us. Okay. Okay, so Professor Luckhurst, let me begin with you. The G20 was, it has a purpose. The purpose is that there is a lot of background. Okay, apologies. So the G20 has a purpose, and the purpose is that it unites the industrialized as well as the developing economies in the world to come and sort out various economic issues or even economic inequality that is present in the world. However, it may not be the case that geopolitical crisis management may be the factor, because as you see, we are undergoing a massive crisis with the Iran war, where the United States has also launched certain airstrikes, followed by the Iranian government firing missiles to various parts of the West Asia, as we call it in India. My question is, when we have a problem like this, where sometime back even our Prime Minister has said that given the context that the world is facing, we need to look at perhaps cutting off the oil or the LPG cylinders. There is a little bit of conservative approach that some of the world leaders are having. Even Singapore's leader has also come out and spoken something on this regard. So, how does it, the question that I would like to ask is, has the G20 evolved beyond its original purpose, or are we asking it to solve problems which it was not designed to handle?
It's a good question. I mean, overall, the G20 has certainly evolved quite a lot over the past, well, especially since it became a leader-level forum in 2008. I mean, of course, it goes back to 1999 when it began as a finance ministerial. But ever since 2008, I mean, originally during the global financial crisis, it was very much focused on global financial issues, dealing with the problems of the crisis, and then introducing new global regulation, macroeconomic, macroprudential regulation in particular. And then, of course, the recovery and growth strategy. So that was the key focus during the crisis. But then gradually the forum evolved a great deal. I mean, ever since more or less the Korean presidency in 2010, the Koreans added development issues to the agenda. And then gradually we had this, what some people call a kind of Christmas tree effect, where every new presidency adds something to the tree, adds a little decoration, one topic or another topic. And so the agenda has very much expanded over the years to issues like gender economic equity, climate issues, employment infrastructure, all kinds of development issues, food security, a wide range of issues. And of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, global public health issues, and in particular pandemics, came onto the agenda as well. So the agenda, and there has increasingly been a kind of foreign policy and security agenda as well. I mean, the G20 was a focus for discussions about Syria back in around 2013, 2014, and migration, in 2015 or so became a big topic. And more recently, obviously, Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine came onto the agenda. There was a lot of controversy about that, beginning in Bali, in Indonesia in 2022, and then later on in coming forward to the Indian presidency. And ever since, there's been this kind of tension over whether the situation in Ukraine should be on the agenda. And of course, now this year, we have the situation in Iran, and of course, ongoing issues with the Palestinian territories, Lebanon, etc. So security issues have gradually come onto the agenda more and more. But this year, actually, the Trump presidency, the US presidency, I should say, of the G20, they seem to want to narrow it back down again to the focus on finance and economic growth in particular, and to exclude some of the other issue areas. And that might be something that the Indian government would disagree with, because usually India and other countries in the global south prefer to have the wider agenda, especially on development issues.
Okay, that's actually interesting, because one, when you mentioned Syria, it was a very localized conflict, right? I mean, you had a civil unrest which was followed by a full-blown civil war, and it's only recently that we saw Bashar al-Assad being ousted and al-Julani has come to power. But when it comes to the Iranian conflict or even the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it has had repercussions on the global commerce. With the especially when it comes to the ongoing clash with Iran, there has been a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, which has kind of been a concern for majority of Asian countries. Perhaps this is something that we will discuss in the following questions. But Dr. Kayembe, my question to you right now is that from the perspective of smaller developing countries, I mean, I do not mean it in a pejorative way. I do consider African countries to be just as important as anybody else. But do you feel, from your experience as a diplomat, that the G20 is still functional and relevant during these pressing times?
Thank you very much for posing this particular question, which is very, very important indeed for a developing country like Malawi. What we have seen so far is actually the genesis of the establishment of the G20 in 1999, mainly focusing on the financial crisis that was more prevalent in the Asian region, and it affected the global economic growth. But over time, we have seen a transition, more or less like branding issues, economic issues, financial issues, including security issues. And from a security perspective, when you consider the destabilization in the Middle East, vis-a-vis the USA-Iran war, it has impacted on the energy supply chain, which is not only affecting the one particular region, but also the African continent is actually affected. So we think that the G20 is an appropriate platform where a number of issues can be discussed, issues about economic independence, issues about peace and security, and the regional stabilization. Because whether we like it or not, we cannot talk about global economic development without talking about the security aspects. When one dimension is actually affected, then it triggers imbalance. It is this imbalance that is actually creating a triple effect on a number of issues, whether you are talking about the geopolitics in general, security in general, and even the international cooperation. So the international cooperation itself should be pursued from different angles within the framework of multilateralism. Countries respecting the rules-based approach towards global governance. What about the traditional norms? If we see changes, where are we ready to provide some givings so that member states, countries are not necessarily be seen to be pursuing zero-sum games towards global governance? So it's a give and take, but the G20 can be an appropriate platform to engage in policy dialogue, suggest what issues should be on the global agenda as we are moving forward. So Malawi is affected, especially in terms of fuel supply chain, because it has been affected for the past 2 to 3 weeks. I think the pump stations were dry, not necessarily because of resources, but because the movement within along the Hormuz has been affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kayembe. That was a very good opening statement that you have made. But I just had a follow-up question. When you mention global governance, is it something something real? Something that is tangible, something that can actually work out, or do we really have to look at a more a regional framework or even highlight framework perhaps? Because this is a war. For example, the Iran war is now from being a 3-power contest, it has come to 2 powers, like 2 countries are fighting it out. So, would you actually think global governance is something that can really, bring dividends to the table in times of crisis like this?
Thank you very much. I think it is important for us to understand that there is a global governance system that is ordinarily supposed to be respected by the member countries. I know that within the UN, we have the UN Security Council, which has got 5 permanent member states. They have got veto powers, but certain geopolitical regions, for example, African bloc, it doesn't have got a representation at the UN Security Council. I know that India, Brazil, and some other countries have also been pushing for the reform of the UN Security Council. If the G20 can make a recommendation that indeed we need to pursue the UN Security Council reform, then we have also to respect the rules that have been established. But what we have seen so far is that the UN rules in terms of engagement are sometimes swept under the carpet, and under the veil of the coalition of the willing, we have seen certain wars being waged against particular regions without necessarily authorization from the UN Security Council. So these are the issues that we are talking about. If you look at the Iran issue, it is increasingly appearing as if it is Iran on one side, then the US and the Israel on the other side. But the truth of the matter is that it's a series of issues that have remained unresolved for a number of years that has actually triggered this sort of crisis that we are seeing now. So it is creating a triple effect in terms of the energy supplies to various parts of the continent, but at the same time, which players are playing a critical role in pacifying and mediating the situation. So the governance system itself, it has to be looked into so that it creates confidence, the trust of the members, but at the same time, inclusive enough so that each particular geopolitical bloc has got a say in how we can actually manage economic, financial, as well as security issues around the globe.
Thank you, Dr. Kayembe. This was a very good answer from your end. And thank you for affirming that India and a few other countries have also been trying for a permanent seat in the UNSC as well. Given the fact that for around 50 years right now, I'm sorry about my math, or might be even more, that countries like these have been trying for a permanent seat. And a country like India, for instance, has had, I mean, it has 1.5 billion population. It is a huge segment of, or a huge share of population on this planet. And being kept away from the permanent seat, I think, may not do complete justice, because India has always seen itself as a leader of the other countries that is there in the developing side of the world, right? So anyway, over to Dr. Mrityunjay. So my question to you is that you are a student and then a professor of literature, and I'm not going to exactly talk about institutions being running on rules, but rather about shared narratives, because I think you're someone who is keen on understanding soft power. So, do you think that the world still believes in the idea of shared international order, or has that story itself begun to break down?
Thank you, Vibhav. My greetings to you and the organizers, and also to Professor Jonathan and Dr. Ephraim. Your question is speaks about literature, and it speaks about how we as nations can develop a shared understanding of each other. Am I right? If
Absolutely.
All right, so the topic of the day has something to do with diplomacy and soft power. Now, if we understand the very nature of soft power, it includes cultural values, it includes cultural elements, it includes literature, cinema, art, and a lot of other things. The intrinsic nature of literature and all these allied forms, which I believe is empathy, is the human feeling of empathy. And it is this human feeling of empathy, when realized, becomes a part of successful diplomacy, natures coming together, understanding each other's mutual goals, trying to work out with each other. And when this sense of empathy is left behind, I guess disturbances and problems arise, and we land up in a situation of not being able to help each other. So, to answer it in short, I would say that if we have to develop a shared world with mutual fulfillment of goals, we need to develop the feeling of empathy. That is to feel for the other person, not to think only about ourselves. The problem is that all of us, as individuals, as societies, as nations, are too full of understanding our own problem, and we are not empowered enough, or we lack the ability to stand at the other side or to look towards the other. side of the issue or people. So it is also see that a lot of mutual accord is obtained. It is through soft diplomacy that we can develop, realize, and fulfill shared goals. Over to you, Vibhav.
Thank you, Dr. Parmar. Actually, you said something very profound. That is empathy. The emphasis on empathy being the cornerstone of diplomacy, right? So
Right.
this is something I think India has been doing. I'm saying from this from an Indian perspective again and again, that in times of conflicts, you have seen that it doesn't matter which country it is. We have sent rescue missions and trying to get back people to safety, or even ensuring that people are moved to different places in case a direct evacuation is not possible. So having said this, I just wanted to ask you one pointed question. We know what is soft power, but is there a soft power from an Indian perspective? uh, what can you what can you bring out as
Vibhavji,
a literature? Yes, there seems to be
could you
literature.
please repeat your question in short because of the disturbance?
Okay. Yes. My apologies.
Okay. Could you please
So
repeat the
yes,
question,
my
sir?
question is that yes. So I do second you on this. The phrase that you said, that that empathy should be like the cornerstone of diplomacy, right? Because generally, what do? We look at the world from a realist perspective. That countries are pursuing interests at the end of the day. So they would go no, they would go to any extent to ensure that these interests are met. However, my question to you, I mean, as a literature student and a scholar, could you please tell me further what is an Indian perspective of
Soft,
soft power?
a very appropriate question, and it soft power and the Indian perspective of soft power. They see. I would like to relate it with my previous response. I use the word sympathy. The other word which we can understand is I use the word empathy, and the other word is sympathy. Sympathy allows you to feel for someone. Suppose you are rich, the other is not. You will feel that you should do something about it because that person is poor or less empowered. So, but the advanced feeling, the advanced human feeling of sympathy is empathy. That means it is not to feel for someone, it means to feel with someone. Suppose it is the Indian philosophy that, and if we apply it to international diplomacy, a country in distress, a country in problem, any other country, if it is in distress or in problem or in some trouble situation, and we as a country, we try to help the other country. Out of, if we do this out of sympathy, then there would be different results. But the Indian perspective says that it is out of empathy that we should do that. It means that the problem should not be the problem of the only the person who is facing it. The problem should be our problem as well. Indian perspective allows you, it gives you a non-dual format. We all are aware of the great Indian philosophy of Advait. That means there is a non-duality. There is no difference between I and you. It is not I who is the helper and you are not who is the helped. It is we together as a single unit. What I am, that you are, what you are, that I am. So that is the Indian way of thinking. That is the Indian philosophy, which is quite profoundly reflected in Indian culture. there are innumerable examples that we can talk of. Over to you, Vibhav.
Thank you, Dr. Parmar. Professor Luckhurst, traditional diplomacy relied heavily on quite compromise and back-channel negotiations, but today diplomacy unfolds publicly, on social media, televised press conferences. Sometimes, it's like a political theater altogether. Sometimes you also see President Trump being at his undiplomatic best, where he has no filter or something. So in a world where there are challenges like this, um, is it possible for quiet diplomacy to continue?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how the image of diplomacy has perhaps been influenced very much by President Trump over well in his first term in office as well as now the second term. I mean, diplomacy. I mean, earlier discussion about soft power, of course. I mean, this idea of how to appeal to others, and the role of social media, the role of this 24-hour news cycle, and all these kind of changes we've seen over the past couple of decades. I think it has influenced the capabilities of governments, of politicians to present themselves, to try and influence public opinion. And I think there have been big shifts in that aspect of public diplomacy, which was which my esteemed colleague Andrew Cooper from the University of Waterloo has written a lot about, the role of celebrity, of public diplomacy, and these kind of issues, related issues. So personality does come into diplomacy nowadays, and clearly Donald Trump is using unusual avenues. I mean, his own social media platform, through social, and he previously Twitter during his first term. So yeah, diplomacy is somehow, there's kind of a dual, two tracks, or probably multiple tracks. One of them is the kind of megaphone reaching out across the airwaves, and the Iranians have done it as well recently. Iranians using memes in social media to try and to caricature Donald Trump and things like this. So everyone has kind of maybe learned a little bit from Donald Trump in terms of using new technologies, new forms of media to try and influence the understanding, perceptions, and about conflicts or whatever the issue might be. So yeah, there's that public aspect, what is sometimes referred to as public diplomacy, and also there is the private diplomacy. There is the informal diplomacy. I mean, the United States was very often using former presidents to Jimmy Carter and others, making visits to different countries to kind of open back channel negotiations. I mean, there's that aspect of diplomacy. And then there's one benefit of the G20, which is that it actually has become a kind of focal point for facilitating opportunities for diplomacy that otherwise might be a little bit more difficult. I mean, some of the big conflicts that we've talked about in Syria, for example, Obama and President Putin, back in, again, around 20, I guess it was, maybe that was in 2013. I think they had a big kind of impromptu discussion at the G20 forum. And since then, the G20, one of the key aspects of the G20 has gone beyond the official agenda, but it's actually every G20 summit, you have multiple kind of bilateral meetings, mini summits, if you like, on the sidelines. And then groups like the BRICS getting together as well. Or Donald Trump talking to Xi Jinping. So diplomacy has become quite diverse, and then of course you have again those kind of informal forums, people from the business world, Yeah, it's a really complex, diverse development. So the formal representation through ambassadors, it's no longer that they are the ones dominating diplomacy in that sense. It has these multiple frameworks and forums.
That's right. Does economic fragmentation, it's a follow-up question, does economic fragmentation make diplomatic cooperation harder? Or does it, does the interdependence still create enough common interest to prevent total breakdown?
That is, I mean, that's an interesting and very topical issue. I mean, at the moment, we can see President Trump in Beijing meeting with President Xi. And whilst clearly they have differences of opinion on a number of issues, there are some issue areas where they are both perhaps interested in maintaining a level of cooperation. Donald Trump took a group of wealthy tech billionaires over there with him, looking to perhaps open opportunities for American businesses in China. Of course, also Donald Trump wants to attract Chinese investment in the United States, although there have always been some concerns about security issues from that perspective. But supposedly Donald Trump is interested in attracting some kind of Chinese investment in the US. So that's that dialogue. In the end, I mean, nobody wins from global inflationary pressures, supply chain blockages, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. I don't think anyone really wins from that, and I think that's where certainly the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, seems to be open to the logic of cooperation with the United States, even on these kind of issues. Donald Trump, I mean, some people see him as a little bit more unpredictable in terms of his attitude, how he might, whether he might be open to more cooperation. But they're having a dialogue there, so hopefully they can find a way to cooperate more effectively on issues like artificial intelligence. I mean, that's becoming a big, well, it's an opportunity, and also there are concerns, concerns about potential risks associated with AI, security concerns, and that's something that both the Chinese and the Indian government, of course, and the United States and the British, and I'm sure in Malawi, I'm sure it's a concern as well. I think that's a concern pretty much everywhere. So these are issues, these are kind of global public challenges that perhaps we do need to have a level of cooperation. And that's where the G20 offers a meeting place for maintaining cooperation, even very technical cooperation, where usually politicians don't, sometimes they give some space for experts to deal with certain policy issues. But those issues are increasingly open to politicization, and that's a challenge. Can you maintain cooperation on technology, on artificial intelligence in particular, when there are these kind of security concerns from all sides about what the other might do? American concerns about Chinese security interference in the US through cybersecurity, and perhaps the other way as well. So can you cooperate even in areas where you perhaps don't fully trust your partner? And that's where I think the government in India can mediate in many ways across these different issue areas. And I think that's one area where I think India is in a very interesting position, that it has this connectivity with countries like Russia. It's part of the BRICS. It has also cooperation through things like the quadrilateral group with the United States and Japan and and Australia as well. You've got that kind of dynamic there. So yeah, India is very interestingly positioned strategically, economically, and diplomatically.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jonathan Luckhurst, for this explanation. And before I move on to other questions to the other panelists, we are also joined by Mr. Sumit Botra sir, who is also the management committee member of our institution, who himself is an expert on East Asian studies. So thank you, sir, for joining us. Over to Dr. Mrityunjay. The question that I have for you is, sometimes we do talk about cultural exports. Excuse me, hello. Am I audible?
You are audible.
I'm just so sorry.
You are quite
Yes,
audible.
the network was little.
I just
Yes.
okay.
We do talk. Yes, sorry, the connectivity was a little off. We do talk about cultural exports when we talk about soft power. So, do you think cultural exports, like right now, one of the best ways of expressions that we see in India would be movies, right? I mean, movies do make a very big impact across the world. Indian movies, in particular, may not be Bollywood anymore. There are other movie industries that are coming by, and there are some renowned authors also. You see, let's say, give the example of Shashi Tharoor or even Mr. Sapan Das Gupta. They do go abroad to places like Oxford and have discussions, raising India's voice in the platforms across the world. So, do you actually see this also uh, as an important factor?
Well, that's a relevant question that you're asking an Indian, dear Vibhav, because India, if I consider India as a nation which has exported innumerable cultural elements to the world. You just spoke about certain movies and books that are appreciated across the world. I will discuss with you some movies and books, but if I take up I believe that cultural export is a very important aspect of cultural diplomacy. In fact, if we have to rate it on some serial number, I would rate it on index number one. Why? Because it is through cultural exports that countries or nations develop an image or are perceived by the world. Before coming to books and movies, I believe that India has exported to the world two other cultural avenues. First is the Indian yoga. If I speak about the Indian yoga and the previous question that you had asked, what is the Indian uh, perception of diplomacy and cultural sharing? So India has shared yoga or yoga to the world, which is for all, for everybody, free of cost. Every person on this planet can breathe in some oxygen, breathe out some, and breathe in, breathe out is going to help them, and it is helping them. Scientists say that, not just Indian scientists, scientists all across the world, and that is one reason why it has been globally, 21st of June has been globally accepted as the International Day of Yoga. Now, this acceptance of yoga as an international in this form speaks a lot about the cultural export of India. It speaks about the cultural legacy of India, and it also speaks about the contribution that India is making. Now, apart from yoga, there are certain other issues that can be understood. And as far as diplomacy is considered, I consider Swami Vivekananda from India to be one of the earliest diplomatic uh, person, or the who was sent diplomats who was sent from India to a global stage. And what he spoke to the people of America was not something about India in particular. He spoke or shared views of a universal approach for the betterment of this world, and this was widely accepted by the Westerners. And this initiative by Swami Vivekananda and all those who have followed the line and have reached out to other countries from India, this has certainly established India uh, as a nation of substance. Now, since your question was not in particular to India, it's as a country, and you spoke about the global relevance of cultural exports, there is so much that various countries are exporting to the other countries of the world in terms of literature, art, and movies, cinema. If we speak about the eighth country, which we consider as the eighth country, most of us, United States, it has so much to share. All of us, even in India, have grown up watching Hollywood, have are influenced by so much technology, and why just USA, other countries, including Japan. I use a Sony device. I use Toyota vehicles. We Toyota vehicles. So all this is a cultural ecosystem. And when we use any commodity or any object from any country, from any other country, which benefits us in some or the other way, we are definitely drawn closer to that country. We are able to understand the other country better. We are emotionally drawn to the country. So your question was about cultural export. I think that if any country is exporting something from their own culture to other countries, or if this export import is taking place, this brings the various countries together. It brings them closer. Any use of any commodity is not just use of commodity. It's an emotional vicinity that they are into each other. So that was from me, Vibhav.
Thank you, Dr. Mrityunjay. Dr. Kayembe, actually extending from what Dr. Parmar was talking about, from an African perspective, right? How important is cultural respect and narrative recognition in diplomacy? Because quite often, many developing nations argue that they are heard economically only after they are heard or after they are first recognized culturally or even politically. So could you just throw some light on this as well? Sir, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Just as an extension, I think every society is identified by either their belief, their culture, how they want to relate with particular regions. What we have seen so far on the African continent is that culture has assisted quite a lot in terms of selling who we are and how do we want to relate with various parts of the world. I'll give you an example from a Malawian perspective. We have had musicians that have been performing in the US, they have performed in the UK. they have performed in a number of countries at the global stage, and that has actually exposed Malawi at the international stage, and issues about what Malawi does, what is the source of economic survival for Malawi. It has been sold to the outside world through the artists. So it is very important that cultural diplomacy has to be strengthened in combination with the economic diplomacy. So we look at one side, the cultural diplomacy, as a mechanism to advance our economic agenda on the international stage. And this also augurs very well with the IR branch of constructivism, because it hinges heavily on how we are interpreted as a country, how we are interpreted as a community based on our beliefs, based on our culture, and where we have a crash of values, where we have a crash of cultural beliefs, that's where dialogue comes in. Because without dialogue, then it becomes very difficult even to understand what the other side is trying to advance. So through cultural diplomacy, we deliberately put forward a picture that can avoid a crash of misunderstanding or being misinterpreted at international level. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kayembe. Since you spoke about Malawian music, perhaps I will also give a try to it by after the discussion, listening to it. But this is a very good perspective from your end. Thank you. So the next question that I would like to ask to Dr. Kayembe himself is that you're aware, and we are all aware, that the African Union has joined the G20 in 2023 when India took the leadership. So has that translated into meaningful influence yet, or is it too early to say? Or is Africa still speaking within structures designed around other power centers?
It is true that Africa joined the G20 when India was actually the chair. And if you reflect on that agenda that India championed, it championed an agenda of economic development. And this is exactly what the African Union has always been championing. It advances its economic agenda on different forums. For example, when there was a BRICS summit in Pretoria, the African Union was represented because it wanted to understand what economic agenda are BRICS countries advancing. Are those agendas supporting or complementary to what we are actually pursuing or not? But when you look at individual African countries, that's where you see that India has got an economic agenda. And one aspect of that economic agenda is economic cooperation. It advances that through bilateral relations. For example, we have bilateral relations with India. There is a representation here of an Indian ambassador. So such type of engagement provides an opportunity for policy coordination, provides an opportunity for engagement on issues not only those that touch on the economics, but also those that touch on the global security. So Africa itself, by joining the BRICS, it has positioned itself at a platform where issues that matter most in terms of African development are actually discussed. And through engagement at that forum, we are able to advance a certain policy perspective so that we solicit common views and common understanding in terms of how we actually move forward. In terms of the fruits, I think it would be too early to pinpoint that out of our joining, this is what we have accrued, but suffice to indicate that there are certain developmental pillars in terms of the African Development Agenda of 2063 that are aligned with the issues that the G20 have been advancing. And we think this sort of collaboration and coordination is very, very important for us to realize common cooperation and development. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Luckhurst, actually, several developing countries, they spend more time and energy on trying to take care of their debts than on, let's say, health or education, right? So, I will tell you something from an Indian perspective, right? So, India being an emerging power, a country that is actually the world's fastest economy and doing fairly well in most sectors. Even in pressing times like this, it is investing big on infrastructure and other things. One issue that has come into my mind is that the G20's debt relief mechanism, right? They have often been criticized as being a bit slow or too slow, as a matter of fact. What does that reveal about priorities built into the current international system?
Again, another good question. Clearly, as I mentioned earlier, since the Koreans really opened up the opportunity to focus on development issues in the G20, and that was one. Not just on development, but also on other issues. So the Koreans really, in a sense, they began the process, back in 2010, during their presidency, to expand the agenda in a way that was beneficial, I think, especially for the Global South members of the G20. And of course, eventually you have the G20's compact with Africa that I think was in the 2017 presidency under Germany. They started that process. I personally, for a long time, have been advocating for the African Union to become a member of the G20. So I was very pleased when that happened in 2023. I think that was definitely long overdue in a sense. Giving Africa a greater membership in the G20, along with, of course, South Africa. So I think that was a good step. In terms of, in fact, during the pandemic back in 2020-21, the one significant substantive agreement, arguably, that the G20 had was actually on debt sustainability. They had I think it was called the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, I think, in 2020, where they basically agreed that a number of, I think, pretty much most completely low-income countries were their debt repayments would be suspended for the duration of the pandemic in order to facilitate greater spending on the pandemic, obviously healthcare issues, etc. So in that crisis, that was the one big issue, really, where the G20 did succeed in some substantive cooperation. On the issue of sovereign debt, that has been an issue on the G20 agenda, again, in several presidencies. That's been an issue in various other forums and organizations as well. So that is an ongoing issue going back 20 or 30 years or more, or even longer. So whether the G20 can bring about progress on that issue, well, this year probably not. Unfortunately, those kind of issues are likely to be excluded from the agenda in Miami during the US summit. But next year, perhaps the British might put those kind of issues back on the agenda, hopefully, because I think it makes sense. It is an issue on which the G20, as accounting for the vast majority of global economic output, global trade, and with this relationship, particularly with Africa and also with other places in Africa and in Asia and Latin America, where sovereign debt is often a significant concern. So I think it's an issue on which the G20 hopefully could be a useful forum, and also in support of actions in other, in the leading international institutions at Bretton Woods and cooperating with the UN, etc. So yes, I would agree that the G20 could play a bigger role on debt sustainability, but this year probably not.
Right. Actually, when you brought up COVID as the topic right now, as a reference, I do recall that many of the countries in the West also, especially in Europe, they went heavily on cash handout. I wouldn't say cash handouts, but it was more of giving money into the pockets of the population in order to boost demand. Actually, there was a lot of pressure within India as well from some economists who used to say that because people are inside and you need the economy to run, we have to have some kind of handouts as a temporary measure to ensure that there is a boost in the economy. But what it led to was a kind of an inflation kind of a situation in those countries where prices of groceries and vegetables, fruits, etc. Went it kind of skyrocketed. India, on the other hand, did something much smarter. I'm sorry for again and again patting my back, but what India did was during the lockdown, we focused a lot on building expressways and metro stations and things that has a more of a long-term benefit from an economic sense. So, having said this, I actually want to bring India into the focus because while we do talk about Indian perspective and as an institution that we are located in India, we are keen to understand how India is viewed outside as well. So, from your experience, how is India viewed? This is for Dr. Kayembe. How is India viewed across Africa, as compared to China or Western powers? Because from this is an anecdotal example that I can give that some of the people that I have met, they often think of India as a country that does not intervene. It is there as a country that wants to cooperate with regional players and ensure that certain problems are solved on the ground. Do you second with this opinion, or is there more to it? You're on mute, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. A very important question. I think at the international level, from an African perspective, what we have seen is that African countries do engage with a number of countries that include the US, UK, China, India, on a number of issues. It could be more especially on economic issues. Malawi, India, normally the engagement is at infrastructure development, especially in the internet sector, but also the economic sector, infrastructure development related to education infrastructure, health infrastructure. There has been positive progress that has been made. I remember one Indian official, a high-ranking official, came about 2-3 years ago, and there was a very economic engagement meeting that took place where technical officials from both sides shared notes and more or less like shaped the discussion at top level. But sometimes we do see that in terms of visibility, I think that's where India seem to be pulling back as compared to countries like the US, UK, and China, because when it comes to, say, for example, economic support from the US, whether we are talking about critical mineral development, road infrastructure, it is accompanied by massive visibility and publicity to the global world. But when support has come from India, I think India lacks necessarily mechanisms that can disseminate the information in terms of how it is conducting its economic diplomacy with a number of regions, not only with the African continent, but maybe the other regional blocks. If you look at China, I think China previously was also lagging behind in terms of economic engagement, but now we have seen that it is investing quite a lot in social media. You can even see the engagement that has recently happened between the President Trump and President Xi Jinping. But immediately the meeting has been conducted, you are getting information quickly into the social media. So the global world is actually moving at pace with what is actually happening. So that's an area that I think India can do quite a lot. I know it is well versed and more advanced in technological development, but it just needs to do more in terms of the visibility. The last issue is about the issue about debt sustainability and the restructuring. I know that a country like Malawi has got some development loans with countries like India, China, the US, European Union. But what has been challenging quite a lot is an issue about how do we service the debt. At the same time, we are able to mobilize resources to finance the fiscal budget. So that's where an issue about debt restructuring is coming in. It requires serious negotiations and discussion with the African Union on how best can we restructure the debt so that the African countries are seen to have a breathing space, but at the same time, we are seen to be strengthening the economic engagement that we have with a number of countries, including India, because it is playing a very critical role in the African infrastructure development. Thank you.
Right. So I have a question for both Dr. Parmar and Dr. Kayembe as well. So right now, English, whether we like it or not, is the lingua franca of the world. Like in most parts of the world, English is spoken not only by native speakers in UK or in the Anglosphere, but also by people who maybe you have a population of 5 to 10% who might speak English, which might be broken, but they do speak. So in a world like this, what gets lost when global governance operates with one linguistic framework? Because India as a country, as an example, is a massive population with so many languages in place. We have many languages which are considered as classical languages, which spans more than 2000 years, right? Some of them are not even dated, like in the sense that we really do not know how far they go behind. So in this context, do you really think that whatever we say across the world, maybe the meaning and the intent is lost if we are stuck with one linguistic framework? First, Dr. Parmar and then Dr. Kayembe.
Thank you for this question, because this question is related not only to study of a language or political science IR. It has to do a lot with cultural studies across the world as well. The answer to this question lies also in the history of this world, that most of the countries were dominated by the English forces, and how in England as a country, or United Kingdom as a country, as a nation, not only dominated a particular continent, but it touched upon all the continents of the world. And therefore, English came into existence as the so-called lingua franca of the world. Now, the problem is not in any language, whether it be English or any other language. The problem lies in monopoly. For a particular forum, problems or solutions or conversations would be held only in a particular language, this many a times eases situations. It brings it serves as a common medium for those nations which are completely different in culture and language. So English or any other language, it it can serve as a common medium for two countries to understand each other, of course, or two societies to understand each other. But then, as a student of translation as well, I believe that the problem of communication still persists because every expression cannot be translated. For example, if I take uh, the example of the word dharma, it's an Indian word, comes from Sanskrit, dharma. It has been universally all across all countries translated as religion. Now, those who are from India or who understand the cultural semblance, the cultural meaning of this world through the understanding of cultural context from which this has been derived, they will find a very different meaning of the word religion and the word dharma to when it is compared to religion. So this was just an example of one particular word. There are so many expressions, so many words that are hurdled by translations and languages. However, your question is regarding English as the common language or the monopoly or the. Can you please repeat your question in brief, dear Vibhav?
Yes, the my question was that whether I mean you actually answered it right at the
Hmm.
beginning, whether English alone being dominant in the world, with having just one language as a lingua franca of diplomacy, does it create some kind of a hurdle to try and understand problems and in the long run trying to solve it?
Okay. To answer it objectively, yes, it does create a hurdle because the stereotypes or the standards that are developed, they are generally shaped by the language, and language is not just a medium of communication. Every language is an expression of a particular culture, a particular way of thinking, a particular system, a particular way of how institutions work. And since English, owing to the history of this world, is the predominant language, or in fact, in many cases, it is the only language that serves as a medium. It provides sufficient cultural alienation from between countries. This linguistic dominance, this gives rise to cultural alienations a lot. It does create access and connectivity, but if it is between you and me, and it is your language that is the universally acknowledged language, a lot of my knowledge or my expression would be lost in the structure of your language. So I see it that way. And if there is just one language and it is considered as the the dominant language and the language, if we do that, then I believe that diplomacy sometimes fails because there is an inequality of intellect that is many a times reflected. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parmar. Dr. Jonathan, what worries me is that the biggest global problems, which affects everyone, right? That is climate change, pandemics, AI governance. These require highest level of cooperation precisely when, let's say, the global trust is the weakest, right? Uh, how do nations I'm including G20 as well. How do nations govern shared risks in an age of strategic suspicion?
Well, that is a big issue, and for some time now, I think I mentioned earlier about global public health and coming into the G20 agenda and climate issues and such. I mean, these are what in political science tends to be referred to as global public goods challenges. So these are kind of collective issues that cannot be solved by one country alone, by one government, not even the United States or China or India, not even the big countries can solve issues like climate change alone. And as we saw in 2020, 21, pandemics as well, these are things that you cannot, if you can achieve international cooperation on these kind of issues, you're probably going to have much better results. And that was one reason why I think the pandemic was such a disaster in the end. I think there was a failure of cooperation in some ways. I mean, of course, it was never going to be an easy situation to deal with, but I do think that there were various failings at all levels of governance, at national as well as international, global. So yeah, I think this is where a forum like the G20, and not only the G20, but other, I mean, of course, now we talk about a growing role of the BRICS and the BRICS plus countries, of course. You've still got the G7 there. You've got the United Nations, which of course is a big focus. So, I mean, you have these various aspects of global governance, and hopefully it's possible to find ways to maintain cooperation despite the current difficult circumstances. And of course, we know that on climate issues, we're not going to have strong leadership from the current administration in the United States. So that's on the SDGs, on the Sustainable Development Goals. Clearly, I mean, everyone is pretty much behind on most of the SDGs. And the 2030 agenda is not going to be achieved. And now there's already talk about what comes after 2030, the post-2030 agenda. So how ambitious can we be? What can we hope for in the future in terms of international or global governance cooperation? But yeah, I don't think there's no need to be absolutely pessimistic either. I mean, despite the big tensions that everyone sees on their TV screens or in social media, there is the boring aspect of global governance, the ongoing technocratic dialogue within the G20. You have the working groups meeting on a regular basis. You have ministerial meetings. You have experts contributing. I mean, I myself have been involved in the Think 20, something that's coming up, the Global Solutions Summit in Berlin. And then you get things like all kinds of stakeholders engaging on the G20 agenda and on other agendas. And that's the kind of technocratic cooperation that is ongoing on a lot of issue areas, even despite the big challenges. And as I mentioned earlier, AI, I think, is one area where perhaps surprisingly, I think we might see growing cooperation across, as I mentioned, the big countries, also the European Union, the British, the Americans, Canadians, and others, as well as India, China, Japan, where I am now. I mean, and indeed, including countries in Africa and the African Union collectively. I think that's where AI is going to be one of these global public goods challenges, because even if one side is winning the contest, whether it be the United States at the moment or perhaps eventually China, it's going to bring challenges and risks that I think there will be a need for intergovernmental cooperation. So I hope you got my daughter is in the background. I don't know if you can hear her or not, but
We are able to hear you absolutely clearly.
yeah. So yeah, I mean those global public goods problems and challenges are the ones which hopefully the G20 will continue to deal with. And one positive about the G20 is, despite the growing tensions, especially since 2022 in recent developments, the G20 has continued to have leader declarations at the end of each summit. The Indians, I mean, I've had quite a lot of discussions with Indian diplomats. I followed the Indian presidency very closely. And one, I won't say who, but one Indian diplomat did tell me that, they were, talking before the summit happened and said to me that, there was a lot of doubts within the Indian diplomatic corps and the foreign ministry over whether there was going to be a successful outcome to the New Delhi summit, and eventually there was, with the summit declaration. So, despite the tensions, the G20 has continued to have forms of cooperation, and I think that's an issue for hope, because I also think that these tensions hopefully will decrease at some point in the future, hopefully. But so I think now things are pretty bad, but cooperation continues. So I think that hopefully will overcome some of the big problems of recent times on security issues, and then cooperation might accelerate on those challenges like AI and also economic issues. I mean, the global challenges with supply chains and energy supply, I think that's another issue area where perhaps we might hope for more cooperation in the future.
Yes, and I was just recalling when you said that even when there was a doubt on consensus, as you pointed out, made by the Indian diplomats, this has happened from time to time, but usually that deadlock was broken by the Prime Minister himself, maybe because he shares a very good personal relation with other heads of the state, those who are there in the G20. In fact, you would come across news articles where some people would be very critical of the relation between, let's say, Modi and Trump. Sometimes they would often say that these two are one and the same, but they are actually not. These are two very different leaders with very two different thought processes. But despite the let us say the divergent views that they might have, they are able to come and agree on some points. One of them is, let's say, G20, the summit that happened in 2023. And perhaps the Prime Minister himself has, with his personal touch, has managed to bring some kind of consensus to the table. Now, having said all this, anyway, Dr. Luckhurst, don't worry about your daughter. I'm sure that you have seen this BBC interview in the past where an expert was answering some questions and the daughter just came back running in the background. So, I mean, we are having a modest panel discussion, and I just gave the example of BBC. But anyway, to end this panel discussion, I have just one final question for everyone. In fact, Dr. Luckhurst has already given the answer, which was more like he's hopeful that it can turn out to be better. But are you, that is Dr. Kayembe and Dr. Parmar, more optimistic or pessimistic towards the future?
Thank you very much. I think in terms of international cooperation, I'm very optimistic that at some point things could just be okay. It's inevitable that within the international system, we will see countries competing for certain issues on a number of issues, but they'll also be cooperating on certain issues. So the G20 itself, with its own agenda about pushing for economic development, peace and security, it's really a very good platform where policy dialogue can be engaged and escalated to a global level, so that when we are discussing about development initiatives, economic development, security, climate change management, AI, there should be a consensus in terms of the approaches and what resources, which risks are we anticipating coming into the processes of implementation and how they should be handled. For India, I think India has to continue with the way it has conducted itself, because we see India pursuing different issues in a different ways. For example, when it comes to economic interests, it engages with China, through the BRICS, it engages with the US, the Middle East. When it comes to security, we know that it is in the Quad. It is also very much promoting collective economic development within the Asia Pacific region, which is very, very good. So the future is still bright. I think so. It will be bright, but we just need to deepen multilateralism so that by the end of the day, we promote international cooperation that can generate mutual benefits for all the players within the international system. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Well, a very relevant question, a thoughtful question, and the future definitely is quite positive. The future is positive because the current generation is not an irresponsible one, as we can see through various news that keeps coming in from across the world. However, there's an old saying that as you sow, so shall you reap. So whatever we sow today, if we wish to reap the harvest of peace, prosperity, global cooperation, I think all the nations should take this responsibility to develop more and more opportunities for one country to understand, one nation to understand the situation of other nation. And as far as the global philosophy is concerned, last time we had one world, one future, and the philosophy that also comes from India, that is of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is all world is one family. So the message, the philosophy has to be inculcated in the mindsets of the coming generations, of the present generations. The future definitely would be fruitful. As a student of literature, I would like to uh, recall some poems that I was taught during my college days. Uh, we all know that there are certain war poets like Wilfred Owen, Seafried Sassoon, and others. I myself have not witnessed the First World War, but it is through revisiting literature, through reading literature, I understand the plight, the tragedy, the pain, the suffering that is associated with war, that is associated with discord. We understand it through cultural exchanges. And therefore, even though we have ourselves not been a witness to a situation of discord, we would not like to enter a situation, any situation like that. So, if we are able to convey the similar messages to our coming generation, Vibhav, the future definitely is not just positive; it's very beautiful.
That's a very optimistic answer, and happy to know that we have some common grounds here. But of course, Dr. Luckhurst and Dr. Kayembe have been more into, let's say, there are some conditions that have to be met before moving to that kind of a future that we want. But thank you for this wonderful discussion that we have had. As a moderator, and let's say on behalf of everyone here, we have learned quite a lot here today. And as someone who always believed that or who always looked at the world from a realist perspective, the idea of cooperation, which I am seeing right now, the kind of discourse that we have brought forward is something that I've deeply considered and thought that is also a way. So now we will throw open the floor for question answers. If there's anybody who wishes to uh, ask questions, you may raise your hand. However, while asking questions, please do introduce yourself. Any questions? Any questions for the panelists to other panelists? No?
Well, most of the questions that you have asked were relevant and all-encompassing in some manner. So, a lot has been asked, and so it has been sufficiently answered. Uh, my question, okay, there comes a question. So, should I proceed with my question?
I'll read it out. I think this is a question from Yukta. So, I am second year law student. I would like to ask Professor Luckhurst. You noted that personality-led diplomacy is replacing traditional ambassadorial roles. Strategically, does this shift towards unpredictable leadership make international systems more fragile, or does it offer a necessary back-channel flexibility that rigid 20th century protocols lacked?
That's a good question, an interesting question. Well, I generally think it's, I see it more positive. I mean, it can perhaps lead to strange situations, like the famous case of Dennis Rodman, the American basketball player, going to North Korea. I'm not sure how official that was, but supposedly kind of representing the United States in an informal capacity. So there are those kind of cases where perhaps it's the celebrity that is benefiting more than anyone else in terms of public profile. But I think there are real benefits sometimes from this kind of, and there are also things like United Nations ambassadorial roles where you get various Hollywood actors and perhaps Bollywood actors as well. Going and doing some good work, raising awareness about issues of poverty or HIV/AIDS or whatever the issue might be. So I think there is a role for that kind of celebrity diplomacy, and also, as I said, it isn't always so public. There are those back channel dialogues as well, and whatever issue is happening between the United States and Iran, for example, I would assume that there's probably some back channel dialogue that is not publicly known. So that creates opportunities for possibly a path to resolving conflict. So in general, I'm overall positive about that kind of diversification of channels of diplomacy. I myself, I've been in something called 1.5 track diplomatic meetings, for example, strangely representing a Japanese delegation going to Australia just at the start of the Japanese G20 presidency to discuss with an Australian group about kind of bilateral issues and the G20 agenda in particular. back in what was that? That was in 2019, I think. Yeah, obviously it's 2019. So that was that was a meeting involving, well, some people like myself, some people from the Australian Central Bank, and from various kind of diplomats as well from both sides. So those kind of dialogues, I think it does. I mean, it helps to create a dialogue, but also hopefully to increase mutual understanding and open opportunities for mutual cooperation on different issues. So in that sense, I think it's all, it is positive. Whatever additional channels for dialogue and diplomacy you can find, generally, I think they are positive overall. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Parmar, I think you were referring to someone, or were you answering a question?
My question was to Dr. Ephraim. So, how do I would like to reiterate the same question that was asked to you. What is the role of India that you perceive sitting in an African continent, in the African continent? And how do you think that these two countries, how India is connecting with major powers or other countries like USA and other countries? How do you perceive India to be connecting with your country or countries that are similar to you in sensibility, taste, and geopolitical situation?
Thank you very much for this important question. I think you're raising a question related to how best can India and Africa cooperate on a number of issues at the global platform. I still consider the G20 as a platform where African issues, or indeed in general, the global South issues are actually discussed. So when you look at the African continent, generally it has been grappling with the challenge of climate change, challenges related to increasing levels of debts, and how best to strike a proper balance between debt servicing as well as debt restructuring. So I think that India being in the G20 and the African countries also being in the G20, we could discuss these issues not necessarily in isolation, but collectively, so that when we try to push in for an issue about debt restructuring, then it is for the collective benefits, not necessarily for the African benefits. That's number one. Number two, there are certain geopolitical issues that are creating tensions across the world, and these issues cannot be solved by one country. It needs collective responsibility. A particular good example is an issue about the destabilization of the Middle East. It has actually disrupted the movement of fuel resources across the globe. It is actually affecting Malawi. But we know that India is in a very good relationship with the US when it comes to security matters. It is also in a very good relationship with Russia when it comes to issues of energy and even security. And of course, with China, they are both in BRICS. So at those forums, I think matters about global security are very important. Matters about global economic development, they are very, very important. If these issues are discussed at that level and they inform the global policies, so that there is a global coordination of policies, collaboration, it could be helpful. So from a realist perspective, I know that India will always have issues in the Indo-Pacific region because of, for instance, the way it perceives how China is pursuing its one belt, one road, especially when it comes to maritime development. But at the same time, on economic issues, there is that economic interdependence. And that interdependence itself provides a platform where certain issues that are contentious can be discussed. Malawi-India relations, yes, this is very important. In economic sector, Malawi needs resources to develop its infrastructure. Malawi needs resources and investors, more especially in the critical mineral sector, because we do have minerals, we may not necessarily have the necessary technology to tap those particular resources. So at international level, we should be able to come up with common rules of engagement, regimes that are beneficial to both parties, not necessarily a kind of exploitation that benefits one particular entity as compared to the other entity. So I would think that we continue engaging, deepening levels of international cooperation, but also move down a little bit to sub-level of multilateralism, where you have countries utilizing bilateral opportunities to advance issues that are beneficial to both countries. Multilateralism has been changing. It is shifting from a formal one to informal one. And both, if we strike a proper balance, we could be able to yield certain economic and security benefits out of informal multilateralism as compared it even to the formal multilateralism that we have seen over the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Given the paucity of time, we will end the question answer session. Before I start with the vote of thanks, I would request our HOD, Mr. Gaurav Pandey, who was actually instrumental in bringing all of us together and for giving me the chance to be the moderator of the session as well. Over to you, sir. Excuse me, sir, you're not audible. No, you're not audible.
Am I audible right now?
Yes, you are quite clearly.
Thanks. First of all, greetings from India to all my foreign friends. Dr. Luckhurst, thanks for accepting my request. And I'm really very happy that within a short span of a time, you have very positively, you have replied to my request, and you are ready to give a insightful your lecture on the G20, because you are one of the expert of this field. Thank you so much for that thing. Really, greetings from my side as well as from my organization. And I'll thanks to Dr. Ephraim, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as Member of Parliament. Sir, thank you very much for accepting my request, and within a short span of a time, you also have ready to give a talk on this, and we and accepted our request for being as a panelist as well. And with this only, we all gathered here, and we have a discussion on how even India can go ahead with certain things in G20. And lastly, I would like to thank my friend, Dr. Mrityunjay Parmar. Thank you so much, sir, accepting my request, and within a short span of
All
time.
thanks to you and the organizers. All thanks to you and the organizers.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, accepting our request, and even though you are taking time from your busy schedule and you have say yes, and we are glad to have you in our panel. and with a lot of discussion. Even the last question, what I was listening, it was really very good. Even I got very much good insights from the minister that how we can go more ahead with the India relation with Malawi. Thank you so much on the behalf of Agastya Manmal Jain College, behalf of Department of Defense and Strategic Studies. I really thankful you all to be a part of this panel discussion and give a very insightful, thought-boggling this thing, a session to all of us, and definitely it will pave the way to youngsters, those who have joined the session, to think about it and go and take ahead these things in their research and other places. Thank you and thank you. I'll thank to all our participants, those who have participated on for this talk. Thank you, Vibha sir, for moderating the session. And now I'll request you to move official vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaurav sir, for this heartening message to the panelists, including me. With this, I would like to start the vote of thanks as well. As we come to the close of this insightful and intellectually enriching panel discussion on how nations cooperate when the world is in conflict, the G20, diplomacy and global governance under pressure, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, I express our heartfelt gratitude to the Secretary of AMJC College, Mr. Udan Kumar Chodia, for his constant encouragement and support towards academic and intellectual initiatives. I also extend sincere thanks to the Associate Secretary, Mr. Hemant P. Chodia, for his valuable guidance and encouragement. Our special gratitude goes to our respected principal, Dr. Mahavir, whose leadership and vision continue to inspire the academic environment of our institution. I would also like to thank our Vice Principal, Dr. Anantnarayan, for his continuous support and presence. My sincere thanks to our Dean, Dr. M.M. Ramya, and Deputy Dean, Dr. R. Sureka, for their encouragement and cooperation in organizing this program successfully. I extend special appreciation to the HOD, Mr. Gaurav Pandey, for his efforts, guidance, and commitment in making this event possible. I would especially like to express my deepest gratitude to our distinguished panelists, Professor Jonathan Luckhurst, Dr. Mrityunjay Parmar, and Dr. Ephraim Abel Kayembe. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights, experiences, and perspectives with us today. Your thoughts have greatly enriched our understanding of diplomacy, global governance, soft power, and the challenges of international cooperation in a rapidly changing world. I also thank all faculty members, scholars, researchers, technical staff, organizers, volunteers, and students whose efforts behind the scenes contributed to the success of this event. Finally, I extend my sincere thanks to the audience for their active participation, thoughtful attention, and enthusiastic presence throughout the session, including the questions that we have got. Thank you all once again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a very interesting discussion, and yeah, thank you for the invitation to join the discussion, and to the authorities at AMJC College as well. I mean, and thank you for seeking me out and inviting me on LinkedIn. That was very good.
Thank you very much for also inviting me that I participated as a panelist in the discussion. It has been very informative. I've gained the road, but also most importantly, I've known new colleagues and broadened my network. Thank you very much.
I am very thankful to my bosom friend Gaurav and to our very capable moderator Vibhavji. Thanks to all of you and thanks to the co-panelists for accepting this invitation from India. Thank you, sir. Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again in a subsequent number of discussions that we will be having. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.